peaceful revolutionary Sylvain Rochon speaking from Ottawa, Canada. Happy to be here again. This week I didn't have a whole, well, actually I always do have a lot of scientific things going on, but I thought it would be more important to talk about the something that's been kind of floating on my Facebook page and Twitter for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's there because it's constant. It's always there. It's always been with us. We're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I put these in quotation marks because yes, it's a conflict, but at the same time, I mean, it's more than that. I mean, it should take a much bigger place in discussions. In my opinion, I think it's been an issue of and a subject of discussion in the world that's been around so long that people have become complacent. They've become like, oh yeah, it's like there's still a war over there. There's still kind of conflicts. There's still problems. What are you going to do? And they kind of move on because it's been there forever, literally for generations. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time just to talk about it a little bit. If you want to receive a lot more information about it, I would suggest that you go on my Facebook. Easy to find, like use my name, Sylvain Rochon, easy to find. I'm going to put the link down there below so you can take on the Facebook or also the Twitter, which I tweet a lot about different things, including that particular conflict. I'm not Jewish myself. But as you know, I'm a peaceful revolutionary. I want things to be resolved peacefully. I want the people to be happy. I want people to live their lives in a nicely and with peace. Right? That's my whole thing. So let's talk about it for a bit. Like traditionally, and let's look back in history. In 1946 or prior to that. Let's just talk about 1946. The whole area that we now call like the Israeli nation, I suppose, this whole block of land was in fact Palestine. It wasn't called Israel, it was Palestine. And approximately 6% of the land was owned by Israelis at the time, which were like fairly small in population. I have the stats here. Looking at, okay, I don't have the stats here immediately, but anyway, it was around. Oh wait, here, I got it. In 46, you had about 600,000 people that were Jewish, and about 1.3 million people that were non-Jewish Palestinians in that parcel of land. And obviously, historically, before that, the whole area of Palestine always had different religions. You had the Jews, you had the Christians, and you had the Muslims mixed together, in particular around Jerusalem, and coexisting fairly well for a long time, even though the Crusades and different events happened where there was some conflicts. But for ages, you had major religions, major religious groups, and their people were coexisting in Jerusalem and in that area of land. And the whole area was called Palestine for the longest time until 1946, or the end of 1946. So you had about 1/3 of the population that were Jewish, another 2/3 that were like non-Jewish populations, and only 6% of the whole area was owned by the Jews, and then the UN intervened because there was some conflicts. There was a lot of pressure from the Jewish communities, especially people that were wealthier. That area that requested Israel be like gaining its independence from the rest of Palestine. So essentially separating what is Palestinian Palestine with the Jewish Palestine, separated them all, and the Jewish Palestine would be called Israel. And the division is fairly simple. it was discussed and arranged by the UN consensus. You'd have 55% of the land that would remain historic Palestine, and another 45%, 55% that would go of that whole slab of land that would go to the Jewish population, and the 45% that would go to the Palestinian population. Now, what I really don't get, and I didn't want to do a whole research about history because I want more talk about what's happening now. Since there was only 1/3 of the population that were Jewish in the whole of Palestine, and only 6% of them owned 6% of the land was actually owned by Jewish. You had fairly concentrated groups of Jewish populations, and you had Jews that were spread out among the Palestinians everywhere. So how did the UN decide on giving bigger portions of the land to to separate and being Israel? To me, off the bat, it's quite unfair, and the Palestinians, of course, were vigorously opposed, not only because of the percentage, but also because of how the land was divided. The Israeli part of the land was a continuous segment of land. Part of it is on the coast of the Mediterranean, and another part was a lot of desert and some other habitable part. But Palestine, or the remainder of Palestine, was actually separated in 3 blocks, what we call the Gaza Strip nowadays, which was much bigger at the time. The West Banks, which is confusing because people confuse West Bank with Gaza. Gaza is on Mediterranean. The West Bank is actually a huge parcel of land on the west of a major river. The Jordan River, I believe. So it's the west of a river, not the west of the actual country. Anyhow, and you had a parcel that's on the northern part near Lebanon. So the whole Palestinian country, which used to be a unified country, controlled by the Palestinians, was divided in three parts, which is a bit of a problem. Instead of dividing in 2 equal parts with contiguous connectivity, it was like the Palestinian areas were divided in three bits. So that was in 1947. That's the UN kind of decided, okay, let's resolve this conflict, this issue over here. Let's give independence to the Israelis, and the Jews can settle in this land, and the Palestinians would live in these 3 little bits that accounted for 45% of the original historical Palestine. Great stuff for Israel, and this is post World War II. Of course, there was a lot of sympathy for the Jews for very real reasons, but really unfair to the Palestinians, who, for the most part, didn't take part in World War II and have been living there for the longest time in peace. But anyhow, so that's what happened back then, and then over time, what happened? I'm showing a map here of what happened over time due to wars and aggression and occupation. Like the West Bank became occupied at the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, war, became occupied land. And you got to be clear, what does occupied land mean? It means that there's an army that's there, and it's still like a warring zone. It's not their land, but the army is there to kind of keep it temporarily. So it's still Palestinian land, but it's occupied by the Israeli army, which means it's still not their land. It's just the Israeli army is there, but it's on Palestinian land. It's been like that for weeks, for years and years and years. So the West Bank is occupied land, owned by the Palestinians and occupied by the Israelis. And the Gaza Strip was boiled down to the Gaza we know today. The northern part that was near Lebanon, went to Israel at some point during the war, after their war. And the West Bank was reduced significantly at that time, I believe in 1967. Sorry about that. and Jerusalem was annexed quite a bit. Most of the city, which was split in two in 47, a lot of it is now in Jewish hands in the part of Israel. I mean, uh, so if you look at the map, like I'm showing it again here, um, it started with the UN decided dividing it unfairly, and you end up with the Palestinians only having Gaza Strip that is their own, and the West Bank being so settled by the Israelis that the actual bits that Palestinians can actually farm and be on is fairly minimal, even though the whole bit of the West Bank is essentially still Palestine. It's just so much of it is occupied and settled by the Israelis that the bits that the Palestinians can actually use without being shot or without being aggressed severely by the Israeli military is fairly minimal, and Israel keeps settling more and more of Palestine and using their armies and using construction of walls to push Palestinians back and back and back further and further and further. Um, Now, a lot of the Israelis in the West, I mean, in North America, um, they think or they believe because of the media that this is all fair because the Palestinians constantly attack them with missiles or terrorism actions, and there's all these things going on. And Israelis are basically just defending themselves, and the military is defending the settlements. And I don't know how they describe the West Bank in that situation over there. They basically ignore it. I'm not sure. But there's a sentiment that the whole of Israel, like the whole of Palestine, essentially should go to the Jews because of religious reasons. It is mainly the Zionists that are a portion of the population that are thinking that. If you speak with Israelis that live in Israel or in that area, they're thinking they don't receive the news the same way. Their thinking is slightly modified depending on who you're talking to. Of course, a lot of them are angry at the Palestinians doing some nasty stuff and missiles and terrorism attacks, and like everybody should be upset about that. The Palestinians, though, are very upset at the military killing or imprisoning their people and preventing them from using roads that would allow them to connect their families to other bits of Palestine. They have a lot of it to be upset about, and just like other blogs that I've done, other videos that I've done before, if you want. Like if the Israelis over there want to feel safe and not suffer from bombings and missiles and aggressions from the Palestinians, well, the ruling body and the military should stop colonizing occupied land that is not theirs, and they should allow travel by the Palestinians from one point to another, and they shouldn't restrict water rationing inside of Gaza, like drinking water. I mean, these are all basic things that, imagine the Palestinians over there. They're like all cramped. Huge population is cramped in small areas. They can't move around. They don't have basic needs and goods. Their buildings and cities are in ruins compared to what they were, what it was before. It was modern cities before, for all this has. Now they can't have, they don't have funds or the resources to rebuild, and they're all packed. This, like, what do you think is going to happen? You have farmers, obviously, that get pissed off, and they just, cover their faces with masks, and they'll attack Israelis in retaliation. You have terrorist groups that crop up out of there because they want to fight back. They want to have a way to fight back, and they have like horrible weaponry against one of the most advanced militaries in the world that is primarily funded by Western Israeli interests, namely in the U.S. So no wonder the Palestinians, or a small fraction of Palestinians, are fighting back. The majority of Palestinians, just people like you and I, they just want to live a good life, and they're being constantly oppressed and behind walls. I mean, the general population don't deserve any of that stuff, and I just can't understand why people don't read more about what's going on over there and feel disgusted. Today, what prompted all this? Why am I talking about this today? Is because I was reading on Facebook. I sent this along. There was a bunch of Hollywood producers that got really angry at Penelope Cruz and Mr. Javier Bardem, who are Spanish individual, like the Spanish descent. They're not Palestinian, they're not Israelis, they're not Jewish, but they participated in a letter drafting or not a poll, but they wrote letters as part of a campaign to stop the violence and to kind of demonstrate how Israel is being the aggressor here, way more than the Palestinians. Of course, the military of Israel will try to protect their people, but like sometimes they actually attack in Palestine to try to take out the terrorists, and they create more terrorists that way because they're already oppressed. That's why the terrorists are there, because it's a population that's being oppressed, that's being relocated in land that they own, and settlements being set up there. I mean, it's nuts. And so they took part in a campaign to condemn Israel and calling it a genocide because there's some extermination going on there. And of course, it's not like Auschwitz. It's Gaza that's completely surrounded by fences and control points. And there's an Israeli Navy on the Mediterranean. The people in Gaza cannot leave their country without going through the Israeli military. And there's all these attacks constantly that kill Palestinians all the time. So calling it the genocide, I think that's too much. Because the genocide is, I mean, I would think it's way more clear. But in a sense, it is as well, because there seems to be, I mean, there has to be an intentional agenda by the Israeli leadership to displace, kill, or imprison, like in Gaza, the Palestinians and take their stuff, take their land. And by that definition, it's kind of genocide, isn't it? But by design, they're not going there for like 2 years and killing everybody with machine guns, but slowly eroding at the population, and the population that they don't outright displace or kill. They're in Gaza. It's an essential large prison where they can't leave, and they have to live under horrible conditions that we would find unacceptable for the poorest of our poor. So these two actors were condemned by a lot of Hollywood producers, telling them that, well, calling it genocide or condemning what Israel is doing there is wrong, and that's not really what's happening. They don't know what they're talking about, and so on and so forth. So, like, wait a minute, like, educate yourself about what's really going on there. Yes, some Palestinians are doing the wrong things, but some Israelis are also doing the wrong things. But what's appalling is not about these separate events on their own. It's about who's really dominating who here. Are the Palestinians dominating the Israelis? No, not at all. They're shut down and they're in prisons or pushed back in the West Bank and territory they own. That's what on the higher level is happening to Palestine. They're not oppressors. They are not in a position to oppress anyone at all. Israel has a huge military for the amount of land they have, and they're settling and pushing other people back, and they're going into the other territory with an official army sanctioned by the government, and they're killing Palestinians or imprisoning them. I mean, I read reports about Palestinian kids that are throwing rocks at tanks, being held for 6 to 8 months. I mean, you're talking about 15-year-old kids throwing rocks at tanks. I mean, come on. Like, who's oppressing who here? So I applaud Miss Cruz and Mr. Bardem for their courage, along with all the other Spanish individuals that partook in that action over there, because we have to speak out. That I mean, you don't need to know all the little details. Yes, terrorism is bad, sure, but in my mind, the bigger terrorist is the Israeli government. And their actions with their military, they're the ones that are terrorizing the West Bank farmers that are trying to live on their own land and not able to. The people that are living in Gaza that try to live a normal life with normal amount of water but can't have drinkable water enough for a whole family. I mean, they have currently, from some documents I've read in Gaza, families have less than 2/3 of the minimum allotment of water of drinkable water a family should have, according to the World Health Organization. I mean, they're living in pretty bad conditions in a part of the world, talking about Palestine, Israel, that should be modern. I mean, it should be Dubai down there. It should be, if people would just like stop the aggression and the oppression and just live and let live. It's like, okay, stop the borders here. These are our lands. If they would only do that and like remove all the walls, remove all that stuff, remove all the military oppression, and just live and let live. I mean, this whole area should be a modern land. I mean, it wouldn't even be fair, but it would be like a great move if they would just remove the armies from the West Bank, because it's not theirs. It's not their land. It's another country. It's Palestine. It's not. It's not Israel. It's Palestine. Okay, get out of there. Set the borders to where the 1947 decision was made by the UN. Allow people to move around or not. They used to, like the Muslims and Christians and Jews used to live in that area for 1,000 years in peace. I mean, let's get that again. Let's get that going again, and just get back to that 55%, 45% state from 1947, and declare those borders, and let them be two distinct nations at peace. At the very least, that would be fair. And the Israelis will never allow that, because now they're settled all over the place, and that's part of the plan, I think. I mean, now they're settled in all these places and say, well, now we're there, we don't want to move. Well, don't move. Live on Palestinian soil for a change. Right? And if you're nice to your neighbors, your Palestinian neighbors and your other Israeli neighbors, they're going to leave you alone, because you don't have a gun in your hand trying to shoot at their kids. Like most likely, just like you can find a way to live together as brothers and sisters, as neighbors, right? I mean, you don't have to have the same ideology, and that's plenty of land for Israel. I mean, that was decided in 1947 that it was plenty. Everything that happened afterwards was because of war, so aggression, and oppression and occupation by the Israelis. The Palestinians did not do any of that. They are the victims of all this stuff. As I guess I have to mention that the countries around Israel are all Arab, and they're looking at this as a potential future aggression against them, and they hold their borders, but they don't see Israel as a nation and as a people in a very good light. But again, it's a little bit like terrorism. If Israel would act like a peaceful nation, would have been happy with their borders, and just protect your own borders and stay there and be fine, the other Arab nations around Israel would not be so peeved off and desire a military conflict perhaps, and to retake those lands. I mean, if Israel was just a peaceful neighbor, it would have been there would be a way, way, way less terrorism going on in Israel. There would be way, way, way less terrorism going on everywhere else, including the States, because a lot of the groups over there, they know that a lot of the funds for Israel comes from the U.S. So it means it's all about pretty much everything that I talk about, like generate peace through peace. You can be strong and still be peaceful. You can have like a very great, well-equipped peacekeeping force, great intelligence agencies to protect your people in your own land. You don't need to go out in other people's lands to be the aggressor. You don't need to be the U.S. You don't need to be like Israel's. It's the only two nations that I know, the modern nations that I know, that are actually occupying other lands, either legally or illegally, and people seem to be okay about it. In the West, at least, but in the Middle East, in Asia, they're pissed off. They don't like it because it's their land we're going into. Like you think a country, for example, I'm picking on a country here like France. If the U.S. would go and set up a base in France, and they already have bases there, I know. But let's imagine the U.S. says, okay, we want a new base here, and France says no. It's like, well, we're going to do it anyway, and if you don't agree, we're going to shoot at you. We're going to make some sanctions. We're going to be economic sanctions. We're going to do all these things that will be unpleasant to you, and you can't stop us because we're stronger. I mean, France. I mean, the government may capitulate and say, well, okay. Because, I mean, we don't want to have all these repercussions, so we're going to let you go there. We're not approving it, but, I mean, you're already there. You're setting up a base and taking some lands, maybe some settlements for the soldiers over there. We're going to let you do it because we can't stop you. Well, what about the people that are living there that get displaced? The French people that get displaced because of the new base. The military is kind of pushing people back, and because they want a settlement for the Americans, and they say, well, we need to protect our citizens there because the French are aggressive. Well, yeah, they're aggressive because you're taking their lands. I mean, so of course they'll be aggressive. I mean, they're not happy, right? I mean, but it would never happen with a country like France because they have a decent amount of strength. They can say, well, no, and the other people in Europe would say, well, heck no. If we allow this in France, then we can allow this in everywhere else. In the Middle East, like Palestine, small country with little to no military at the time, a lot of all of Europe and the West were petitioning to give a sovereign nation to the Israelites, well, to the Jewish population over there. Palestine didn't have a whole lot to say, which is why they were totally against it, and the land was separated in a way that would benefit in quantity, but also quality of land and contiguity of land to the Israelites, to the new nation. It was an unfair decision, an unfair separation of land to the Palestinians, and that's because of the Holocaust. The Jews, people wanted to give the Jews. We're talking about the West and Europe. People wanted to give the Jews their own land because they felt bad for the Holocaust, and the Jewish people, since I don't know when, like thousands of years, didn't have their own land. They've always been all over the place. So it's like a gift that for the damages done to the Jewish people because of the Holocaust. But then the Jewish people decided to be aggressors and dominators on their own. It's very ironic that they would do that. I mean, they got the lands because they were oppressed and they were suffering from a genocidal maniac killing them all. And in turn, what they do is they say, well, they start being aggressive and dominating. And to a certain extent, I agree with Mr. Bardem and Ms. Cruz. They are doing genocide of their own under the pretext of defending their land and themselves. I mean, it's total craziness. So whenever you see stories or you hear somebody talking about the Palestinians being aggressive, think about the history of this land. Think about who's really dominating there, who has a capacity to actually dominate, and what's really going on there. Don't read the news from the West. The media from the West, just like the American Congress, are primordially dominated by Jewish people. Nothing against the philosophy. Being Jewish is, I mean, there's no problem being Jewish, but people of a certain, not ethnicity, but a vocation, will have the tendency to protect their own. And you know, the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and these families that own the banks and the medias, they are Jewish families, predominantly Jewish families. So they have a lot of money, they have a lot of influence, they want to keep things rolling in a certain direction, and they're being unfair with the rest of the world. It's being unfair to people, to humanity. I mean, it's not a question of religion here. It's a question of just being human. I mean, you have to. Yes, they don't have the same faith, but I mean, let's treat them like humans. Let's treat them fairly. Everybody needs to have basic stuff, and that includes feeling secure. If a person gets aggressive, hurts someone, whatever creed, race, or religion they are, well, they should be. I don't say punished because I don't like the whole punishment thing, but they should be stopped. Let's call it that. In reasonable, using reasonable means, should be stopped so that they are prevented from hurting others. That's it. Okay? They should be stopped. Not dominated and attacked and take their stuff, take their lands, and you're creating what you're fearing by doing that. We are creating extremists, terrorists by doing these things. Stop. Okay? Anyway, that's going to be it for today. I've talked long enough. I hope you do something about this. You get vocal. Share the posts that I have on Facebook and Twitter around these subjects. Do your own exploration. Talk with people that are from that area. That would be a great thing. Get the right information, not from news in the Jewish owned media of the West. They twist and they kind of convert. They show only one part of the story. They show, the Palestinians as being terrorists and right-wing fanatical groups a lot. But there's a portion of the politicians that's like that, but they don't really tell the right story about what the Palestinians are doing. The Israeli government and military are doing most of the time. So we don't see the full story of the West. So go check out your own thing, your own information. From Al Jazeera or from people that live or have lived in Israel. I'm fortunate to know a few people that have lived there for X number of years. Some people that were either Palestinians or Israelites. I know both. And they're telling me a very, very different story about what's really happening there. So you do your own explorations and you'll know the truth. For now, that's going to be it. Enjoy your weekend. And be a revolutionary, seek out the truth, and spread the truth. As much information as possible, always. Ciao for now.